Talk a little bit about liquids. That's on 153. Do liquids burn? No. What needs to happen in order to, what's that? Vaporization. Okay, so they turn into a gaseous state in order to burn. So when we talk about specific gravity, it's in relation to water in the same conditions. So if you have gasoline, where will you find gasoline so you had a gasoline spill in the water?
It's gonna be on top.
What's that? It's gonna be on top. Okay. What if it was heavier than water? Okay. In order for those vapors to escape, they have to be under a bit of pressure and greater than atmospheric pressure. I can talk about this a little bit. Yes. What's a flash point?
Can't hold the fire.
I'm sorry?
Where it can't hold the fire, so it just kind of will ignite but won't continue burning.
Right, so the minimum temperature needed to ignite, but not sustain combustion. So how about fire point?
Yes. One part does, or I can catch fire, or where, fire.
It will sustain. What is combustion?
Chemical process of oxidation that produce at a rate fast enough to produce heat and usually light.
Okay, so it's rapid oxidation. Okay, here's a few terms. We're actually gonna get a lot more in depth in these terms when we get to that HazMat. So if somebody tells you something's soluble, what is that? What do you think about?
That it mixes with water.
Yeah. How about polar solvents? Can you give an example of a polar solvent? Alcohol? Yeah, I think that's correct. Methanol and ethanol? Yes. Acetone. Like the nail polish remover has acetone. So if you have a liquid that is lighter than water, is it going to be harder or easier to extinguish with? Harder. This table is on page 154. Look at the flash point of gasoline. Next. What's that?
It's negative.
Yeah. So even at pretty cool temperatures, we can ignite, right? Go ahead.
So for gasoline, the flash point is negative 36 degrees. If it gets to negative 37, does it just like freeze? Or
Yeah.
Oh,
You know, this is where it will ignite.
gotcha.
So negative 37, and it'll still be within that ignitable.
Gotcha.
And then if you look at diesel, we talked about that, how some people. Keep their engine running. Do you think an engine runs at hotter than 125 degrees? Okay, so ethanol and methanol have a specific gravity of less than 1. So what does that mean to you? It won't rise. It'll float. So whereas liquids will maintain the shape of their container because they don't have a definite shape. Solids do. They'll maintain their shape. We talked about this yesterday. Kind of tried to show you a bit, but I think the wood was a little too green to really burn. But this kind of shows how, the shape and position of the fuel affects the rate. The ease of ignition. And then what is going to ignite easier with less heat applied to it?
Solids.
Why is that?
That's a smaller surface to mass ratio.
Good. So oxygen, we talked about, is the primary oxidizing agent in most fires. Now, this is important because this will come up for the rest of this chapter. Probably be a test question, but energy released in fire is directly proportional to the amount of oxygen available for combustion. If you don't have oxygen, is it going to sustain combustion? So in an open area, a fire will release energy based on given surface area. Plenty of oxygen, continue to feed that. And then we've talked about this, but we're going to go more in depth into it. Fires in a compartment with limited air supply can only react with oxygen from the compartment's air. And then any additional oxygen supplied through openings. And so that's an important factor when we start looking at fire attack. Fire in oxygen enriched atmospheres are more difficult to extinguish. They do present some safety hazards. Where might we find oxygen enriched atmospheres?
Hospitals,
Uh-huh.
what are they called, caregiver homes or
Okay.
really elderly?
Uh-huh.
Maybe a warehouse.
Where else? Yeah. Okay. Where else? No, you guys got nothing? You might see it in a lab. How about in an ambulance? Yeah. Yes.
Is that why you can't smoke in like hospitals?
Mhm.
Like a room?
Yep, it can go boom. Yeah, we've had that throughout my career. Had it seen it a couple times where people are on oxygen and smoke. And it does not end well. Okay, so we're gonna touch briefly on the flammable range. And you know what, I forgot to show my.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on the book here, it says, oxygen enriched areas, can burn. Materials that usually do not burn in normal oxygen, like no mix hoods. What would you like? Would you go into let's say a healthcare facility that has a lot of oxygen, with regular PPE, even though it has the potential to burn your no mix hood or your PPE or?
Yeah, you just have to read the conditions, it might take more water to put it out, so.
Okay.
But just be aware. No, great question. Okay, we're gonna talk a bit about flammable range. Got a video that explains this.
G'day everyone, my name's Matt and welcome back to a series of videos which I'm just going to start calling the fire show because it's just way easier to say. In today's episode we're going to be talking about flammability range, which is to say the amount of flammable gas or vapour that is required to mix with the air to create a flammable atmosphere. Now this varies widely between substances. For instance, propane and acetylene are very different as to where their flammability range is. But today we're going to have a bit of a look at propane and its flammability range. And we're going to have a look at how it's got a lower side of the flammability range and an upper side, and even its ideal mixture. Now to do that, I don't want to do that in here because it's going to end really badly for me. So I need a nice controlled environment to actually allow me to play with the different mixtures of fuel and oxygen. Now I've gone ahead and I've built something that's probably going to help out with that. So here it is. So now that we have somewhere we can safely control the reaction, what I need to do is fill this box full of a flammable gas. And as I mentioned before, we're going to be using propane because it's both easily available and easy to use. Now, propane's flammability range is around about 2 to 10%, give or take a couple of percent depending on what you're reading, which means that we can actually get a reaction with a fairly low concentrations of propane in the atmosphere, which means that as I add propane to the air that was already existing inside the box, we're reaching that lower explosive limit quite quickly. And you'll see that I actually tried a spark fairly early on, but it's not quite rich enough. It's still down below its lower explosive limit, and therefore we can't get that reaction. So I add some more gas until I get to a point where we're actually within our flammability range, and I'm turning my gas off. And then as soon as I try my spark again, we can actually see that we'll get that reaction. And you can quite clearly see that nice blue flame, which is just showing that for as much of the fuel that was present, there is certainly more than enough oxygen for it to be fully oxidized. And you can even see that there is condensation building up on the perspex of the box at the end, which is really just showing us that our byproducts of our fire are H2O and carbon dioxide. So now that we've seen our lower explosive limit, we can go ahead and have a look at the upper explosive limit. Now, the upper explosive limit is basically when we've saturated our atmosphere with so much fuel that it's no longer becoming flammable. And that's because there isn't enough oxygen available to actually sustain combustion inside that atmosphere. Now, what we're going to do to demonstrate that is put a lot more propane into the atmosphere this time around. And that's going to really saturate the available oxygen inside the box. And it's going to really start to restrict the combustion that can take place. Okay, so as before, I've turned my gas off, and this time when I hit the spark, we don't see that blue flame moving across the box like we did in the first one. What we actually see is a very light flame quickly flick across the box, and then the majority of the flame is actually restricted to the exhaust valve on the left-hand side of the box. And this is because the rest of the box is above its flammability range. It's simply too rich to burn. So what's happening is the air is being drawn in from the outside around that little exhaust valve, and then it's getting into a flammable range. And you can actually see that while it's been burning, it's mainly burning around that valve where the oxygen can actually get in and mix with the fuel. So that's a really different kind of reaction than we got in the first one. And this is simply because there was just too much fuel in the atmosphere for it to be oxidized at once. It actually needed to draw more oxygen in so it could then oxidize the fuel that was available. Okay, so now we're moving on to the optimal mixture. Now, the optimal mixture is a place along the flammability range at which we get our most energetic reaction from our fuel source. And in the case of propane, it's actually at 4%, which is a little bit counterintuitive because you might just think it's going to be dead in the center between the lower explosive limit and the upper explosive limit. But this isn't actually the case. And we see that with quite a lot of products where the optimal mixture is actually just somewhere along the flammability range. Now, what's actually happening here is for all the fuel that we've put into the atmosphere, there's also all of the oxygen that's required to fully oxidize the fuel, and it's all mixed really well. So that all that's required is a spark, so that as soon as you get that spark, the chain reaction can take place and all of it can actually be oxidized really quickly. And that's why we get much more of a bang from our optimal mixture than we do with our lower and upper explosive limits. So you'll see here that all I need to do is just add a spark and we get a really quick reaction. It's much more energetic than we get with the lower and upper explosive limits. Now, I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Please don't try this one at home. If you try it and it goes wrong, you could end up with some very serious injuries. So I've done it. I've made a video about it. You don't need to do it. All right, so now that we've seen how flammability range works, we know that there is an upper and a lower explosive limit at which combustion can start and stop. And above and below these limits, combustion simply cannot occur because there's just either not enough air or there's not enough fuel available to actually sustain combustion. And we also know that somewhere in the middle, depending on the substance, is an optimal mixture. And this is actually going to give us our most energetic reaction for the fuel type that we're using. We also know that the flammability range changes drastically between whatever we happen to be using. For instance, in propane, we know that it's about 2 to 10%. But for acetylene and carbon monoxide and a few other gases, it's much wider than that. It can be anywhere between sort of 5 to 98%, depending on what you're actually using. So the chemical that's involved or the substance that's involved really changes the flammability range and what we can expect to see from those flammable gases. All right, that's it for this one. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.
All right, like I said, we're gonna dive deeper into that during HazMat. We'll cover the more depth. Okay, but do you guys have a basic understanding what the LEL and the UEL are? Okay. So in the self-sustaining chemical reaction, let's see, I think we're on page 159. We talked about in combustion, we're having a chemical reaction. And then do you know what a free radical is? It is oxygen molecule that is missing one of its electrons, and so it's unstable, and so it's going to be looking for another electron, and so it's going to be trying to steal those from someone else. And so as we're having those reactions, kind of speeds up and then continues the whole process until we do something to stop that reaction. We're gonna a lot of the stuff I've got here, I'm gonna show you videos more than the PowerPoint because it just does a better job of kind of showing and explaining it. So do you guys know the 4 stages of fire development? Okay, incipient, and that's what?
That's like the first start.
Okay, it's just beginning. Okay, what's the next one? Okay, and then? Fully developed, and then what's the last? Okay, and what causes decay?
After the fire, so when fire reaches fully developed, burn as much fuel as possible.
Okay,
Or as
it's
much like
possible.
all the fuel that's there is burned, which causes fire to run out of fuel, which is fire.
So what else can cause it to go into decay?
Oxygen.
So it's consumed all of its oxygen, or it's consumed all of its fuel. What are most of our fires?
Oxygen deficient.
Oxygen limited, and so when we go to a fire and it's been burning and maybe it's in the decay stage, and we open up the door, Okay, so then what happens? And then it goes back into that growth and going to the fully developed. Got a couple videos I'm showing you that we'll watch and you can kind of see how that happens. But we'll watch this one, about 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Matt Hinkle, Box Alarm Training, and today we're going to talk about the time temperature curve. So familiarizing yourself with a time temperature curve, and more importantly, a modern fire time temp curve, can really help you plan out a more efficient fire attack. So the original time temp curve, a lot of us are familiar with that, and that came out around 1908. So it's been out a really long time, and it shows the stages of fire growth. Okay, so right now you're looking at the original time temp curve, and this is basically just showing that in the graph, you got temperature on one side and you have time coming across the bottom. So when the fire ignites, this point is the ignition of the fire. And it's pretty easy to tell that the fire is going to grow. It's going to increase in temperature as the fire progresses or goes through the stages of fire growth. So we have the incipient stage or the ignition incipient going up to growth. This would be fully developed. And at this point, basically fuel, heat, and oxygen are balanced. So it's free burning. It's burning basically everything that's available fuel, it's burning at that time. Then it starts to fade off, and it fades off because the fuel starts to burn away. So it's not limited by the amount of oxygen, it's limited by the amount of fuel. So basically when that fuel runs out, then we end up with the fire being completely extinguished. So being able to look at a structure fire and being able to tell what stage of fire growth that structure is in is pretty difficult without a good bit of experience or training on smoke reading and looking at conditions pretty often. But understanding what can happen inside these phases is really important because firefighters can get in a really dangerous position in vent limited conditions. So early fires were what's called fuel limited conditions, which the fire is limited by the fuel that is there in the structure. Modern fires are limited by ventilation or air, and primarily that's because of two big factors. One is the new construction, energy efficient homes that are tightly sealed and not able to breathe as easily. And the second one's going to be the fuel that is a lot more readily available or produces a lot more heat energy than fuel from the past. So in a modern time temp curve, things look a little bit different. The fire starts about exactly the same, really. We have the incipient or the ignition stage right here, and the fire starts to develop. Well, because new products of combustion provide such a huge amount of heat energy, they can choke themselves out. So the fire is going to grow to a point right here at the top of this first curve, and then it's going to kind of lose its oxygen, and it's going to drop down to this lower level, which is basically because it's run out of oxygen or limited, it's vent limited. So the fire has plenty of fuel that's available. So right now, there's fuel that's just sitting there waiting to burn, but it lacks the oxygen it needs to be free burning or burn really well. So usually, this is when the fire department arrives in a vent limited situation. We're in this section of the graph, and when we arrive, we open up a door or we break a window or something like that. If we're going into to perform ventilation operations, we just gave the fire a tremendous amount of oxygen, and that's all it needed. It had plenty of fuel. So you get this really rapid increase in temperature because the fuel was already sitting there. All it needed was air to be able to move into that structure to start breathing and be able to do more complete combustion. Once you go up to this point, you're really sitting at the original time temp curve. So this is back where fuel, heat, and oxygen are really balanced fairly well. And then as this dies off, fuel starts to go away again. But the key thing to remember is right here, that's where vent limited situations occur. And that's where it's really dangerous for firefighters to operate because you'll get a very rapidly moving fire or a really, the growth rate of the fire can outrun the cooling capacity of a hand line. If you have selected the wrong hand line or if you have malfunctions or you get yourself in a bad situation, high winds, there's a lot of different things that can happen. But this is the point you really need to be concerned about is a vent limited situation. So really older fires or legacy style fires are limited by the fuel that's available. So basically they lose their momentum when they lose fuel. Whereas a modern fuel or a modern fire is limited by ventilation or oxygen because they're fuel rich. They have plenty of fuel available. They're more limited by the amount of oxygen that's available to provide combustion. So understanding the time temp curve and more importantly, the risks that are associated with a vent limited fire are really important for today's structural firefighting and understanding how to develop tactics and strategies that go along with structural fire attack. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a like and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel to see the future videos. You can also go to our Facebook page at Box Alarm Training on Facebook, and probably our greatest resource is our website, which is www.boxalarmtraining.com. If you have questions that you would like to see answered, write them in the comments below and we'll try to get to those as soon as we can. Thanks for watching.
He's got some great stuff. I recommend checking out his website. All right, so these are just some general rules. So it's fuel limited if you've got an abundance of oxygen. And that the characteristics of the fuel will control the fire development.
Can I get like an example of fuel? Cause I'm getting fuel limited and
Okay.
oxygen. Next,
Sure, okay, so the growth of the fire is limited by how much fuel you have. Where a vent limited, the growth of the fire is limited by how much ventilation you have. So you think about, in the wildlife world, you've got a grass fire. So, that will burn until it runs out of fuel, right? Or until we remove the fuel by putting in like a fire line. So that will, because it has unlimited access to oxygen. So that will be a fuel limited. Or say you have a, maybe a bedroom and all the windows are open, and in that bedroom, you have a dresser and a bed. So fuel limit would be, it fully consumed the bed, it fully consumed the dresser, and then it went out. Okay, so it will be dictated by the amount of fuel.
gotcha.
Whereas if that same bedroom was totally closed up, the door was closed, the windows were closed, it would burn until what?
Oh,
Till it ran out of oxygen. And so it was limited, the size of that fire limit was limited to how much ventilation it had, how much oxygen. Okay. So, does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And so predominantly ours will be ventilation limited. Whereas if you're able to open up the space completely and give it as much oxygen as it wants, it won't go out until the fuel's gone. Clear as mud?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so here it goes into a little bit further definition. Ventilation limited fires have access to all the fuel they need to maintain combustion, but they don't have enough oxygen. All right, we talked about the 4 stages here. And the 3 key factors that control how fire develops is the fuel properties, the ventilation available, and then the heat conservation. Here's another video for you guys. I can't remember exactly how long this is. So the
Stages of fire. Incipient stage of this is the beginning stage. It starts when heat, oxygen, and a fuel source combine and have a chemical reaction resulting in fire. The fuels reach their ignition temperature and is usually represented by a very small fire which often and hopefully goes out on its own before the following stages are reached. Recognizing a fire in this stage provides your best chance at suppression or escape. Fires in this stage can be extinguished or controlled by portable firefighting equipment. Smoke allows visibility in the room and heat emitted from the flame is low. A smoke alarm can be activated. Growth stage. Fire in this stage depends on the structure of the building and the fuel available. There are sufficient oxygen and fuel to support the ongoing growth of flame. A plume or layer of smoke above the flame is present. The temperature in the room increases. Condensation disappears from windows. Brown stains and cracks on window glaze may appear. Flash over. A flashover is the near simultaneous ignition of most of the directly exposed combustible material. In an enclosed area. It is between the growth and the fully developed stages of fire. When temperature in the room reaches between 500 to 600 degrees Celsius, it can occur. This is how it happens. Hot gases rise to the ceiling and spread out across to the walls. Heat radiates downward and intensifies until all combustible items reach their ignition temperatures and burst into flames. Temperatures soar to as much as 1000 degrees Fahrenheit in a few seconds. Even a firefighter in full protective gear is unlikely to survive a flashover. Firefighters are trained to recognize the signs that flashover is about to occur. Dense black smoke with tightly packed curls, black fire. Dense black smoke that pushes out of a doorway or window opening. Smoke that has accumulated as low as a doorknob with the fire seen below. Rollover occurs when ignited fire gases or incompletely burned fuels rise to the ceiling and spread out horizontally. Then smoke appears to suddenly start burning. If nothing is done to ventilate the room or cool the air, this condition leads to flashover. Fully developed stage. On this phase is where energy release is at its greatest. The temperature will be at its highest point 700 minus 1200 degrees Celsius. Darker or denser smoke arises, substantial heat, blackened window blazing. There will be visible exterior flames, and the flames obscured by smoke. Fire's reached its maximum rate and all combustible materials have been ignited. This is the hottest phase of a fire and the most dangerous for anybody trapped within. Decay stageth final stage of fire. It is usually the longest stage of a fire. It occurs when a fully developed flame starts to run out of fuel or oxygen, putting an end to the fire. Two common dangers during this stage are: first, the existence of non-flaming combustibles, which can potentially start a new fire if not fully extinguished. Second, there is the danger of a backdraft when oxygen is reintroduced to a volatile, confined space. Fires can be forced into this stage by reducing oxygen supply. With firefighting equipment, limiting its available fuel will help contain the growth of fire, even if a fire appears to be out. Rekindle may still appear if the elements needed is still available. A backdraft is the abrupt burning of superheated gases in a fire, caused when oxygen rapidly enters a hot, oxygen-depleted environment. For example, when a window or door to an enclosed space is opened or broken, backdrafts present a serious threat to firefighters. This is how it happens. A fire burning in a confined area consumes all the oxygen. Visible flames disappear, solid fuels smolder, and hot flammable gases accumulate and fill the room. The temperature increases, the gases expand, and pressure builds, pulsing against doors and windows from outside. The building may look like it is breathing or throbbing. If an opening is made to admit oxygen, the hot vaporized fuel bursts into flames and the pressurized gases explode through the opening, resulting in a rolling fireball. Characteristic warning signs of a backdraft include yellow or brown smoke, smoke which exits small holes and puffs, a sort of breathing effect, and is often found around them. Edges of doors and windows which appear brown or black when viewed from the exterior, due to soot from incomplete combustion. This is an indication that the room lacks enough oxygen to permit oxidation of the soot particles. Firefighters often look to see if there is soot on the inside of windows and in any cracks in them. The windows may also have a slight vibration due to varying pressure within the compartment due to intermittent combustion. Backdrafts are very dangerous, often surprising even experienced firefighters. The most common tactic used by firefighters to diffuse a potential backdraft is to ventilate a room from its highest point, allowing the heat and smoke to escape without igniting. Importance of knowing the stages of fire. 1. To find most effective extinguishing method. 2. To minimize risk to firefighting personnel. 3. To predict the progression fire. Prevention is better than cure. To make sure employees or members have the ability to combat the early stages of fire, make sure you maintain your fire protection equipment and have a training or drills once or twice a year. And if the fire is out of control, make sure to always call first.
Okay. we saw that in the video, shows like, this is a fuel control, which is typically legacy homes. And then a ventilation control, which is modern. So what does this represent here?
Us coming in, giving it oxygen, basically.
I'm gonna zip through these, but if you want me to slow down, let me know. Thermal layering, talked about that as the heat rises, hits the top, then it'll start to come down because it's running out of room. What happens if you've got smoke or heat right down here? You probably should go there, because that is very, very hot. Got some videos and I can't remember exactly where I put them. Okay, we touched on vent limited decay. Questions about that, or do you want to move on? We're good, okay. Okay, so this right here, I'm saying that we have taken away the oxygen, so it's moving into that decay stage, but pyrolysis can still occur. And what is pyrolysis?
Solid to gas.
Yeah, so it's still off-gassing, and those are ignitable, right? Okay, so this makes sense, right? The highest pressure is where the fire is burning, because those gases are expanding, right? Creating more pressure, and it wants to get out to low pressure. So it's decreasing as it goes, and it finds the outlet there. Got some videos here. How do you know, how would you identify that there is rapid fire development or potential?
Smoke,
Okay, what are you gonna see in the smoke?
like color of the smoke, or like maybe some flaming within the smoke.
So sometimes we'll see like that thick, black, nasty, just poofy smoke. That stuff is just itching to burn. There's a gentleman, Phil Jose is his name, and he does a series called The Art of Reading Smoke. It's available online. We also have some videos in fire engineering. Watch those. We don't see enough fire in the fire service, fortunately, that we are going to be experts. So you won't be able to add to your slide deck just on your fires alone. So learn from other people's fires. And he does a really good job of explaining, like showing you where the smoke is, what it's doing, what it's going to do, and being able to look at the colors, the volume, the density. You have some videos of rollover and flashover. What happens during flashover?
In that room, like everything in that room is on fire.
Okay, so everything ignites all at once. Why does that happen?
Because the temperatures get so hot that the unburned fuel and the smoke starts to heat up, and with the flames coming out, it just ignites it.
Yeah, so everything is right at that temperature. Everything is so hot. Everything in that room is off gassing that those vapors are ready to burn. And so it's missing something. And it's probably going to be it's missing that oxygen. As soon as we introduce the oxygen, everything. Okay. And it's impressive. Okay. Go back. It is really hard for anybody to survive a flashover, even us in our gear.
So, if you ever find yourself in that situation, is it like open up the nozzle and turn it all the way to the fog pattern?
Anything yes,
Or
you
straight stream?
open it
fire
up, push that heat and fire away from you. If you have time. Because you might not have the time to react, but
Right,
you're
yeah.
going to find whatever way out you can. If you can bail out, get down low, whatever you have to do. My sister was actually involved in a flashover in a training burn and she survived.
Wow.
Okay. I'm gonna watch this one and then we're probably gonna watch it again. Can you guys see it okay? Okay, back it up here.
If that was occurring, would you start doing it defensively? Like, would you start spraying it from outside?
That's for sure.
Yes, so
But like, as they're evacuating, would you just start going like whoever's up?
as soon as you can, yeah, you're gonna have to get into position. So did you guys hear the 3 blasts on the air horn? That is a universal signal to get out of the building. Okay, so that means whatever you do, just get out.
So I noticed like in the video, like the fence that is closest to the house, there's civilians standing there. Is that usually like something we try to do is get everyone like away?
Yeah, for sure. We want people away in the green zone because first for their own safety, because they're gonna be exposed to all that nasty stuff. They could get hurt, but also sometimes people do things like they try and get back in the building. And so we get them out, but another thing that happens is they interfere with our operations, but certainly for their safety, we want them out in the green zone. Or the cold zone. Okay, so we're watching here. See how that's. It's not on fire yet, but you see it starting. And what was that smoke doing?
It was getting thicker and a lot of those.
So thick, dense. And starting to push out. That is just right for burning. Something happens here. And that almost instantaneously everything ignited. Okay. Got a couple more videos. What is, yeah, go ahead.
On that one, why would you break the windows on that side next to the fire when they're first starting? You can see them breaking that window right there.
So, did you see the breaking window right there?
Yeah, it's breaking it right there. So I'm trying to wonder why he's ventilating a house.
Yeah, no, that is an
Right.
outstanding question. And what happened there when he broke that window?
He starts that whole,
He introduced oxygen. There used to be an old school of thinking that you go in and you break the windows, yeah. And so I don't know how this video is, it looks a little bit dated, but as we understand now. You don't want to introduce, don't break a window, don't open a window, don't open a door without having control of that or having a hose line in place. So, yeah, go ahead.
So we used to watch these videos in fire science with Chief Harkins.
Yeah.
And he actually was explaining that they used to do that to try to improve the environment inside by getting rid of the smoke.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's probably why they broke it.
Yeah, that was the thought, is to open up a window, let the heat and smoke out. But as we know, it might work for a second, but then we're feeding the beast. Okay, so how long from? See if I can back up, you know.
You can see the flames.
Okay, so here. 5 seconds, that's picking up there, got that working out.
no, 20 seconds.
Yeah, so about 15 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
Have you ever been to a fire where there's like flashed over? Not that you were inside, but like it.
No, well, I was inside, but yeah, we've had it. I'll show you a video here in a moment of a rollover, which I've been, the rollover actually happened in a breezeway, and I was belly crawling in, and it rolled over, and at first I was like. I was like, oh, I gotta put that out. Cause it can be really, really cool looking if you're not, yeah. All right, so what is our neutral plane?
Smoke and the fire is. So it starts coming down, I don't know the hand motion, but like it starts coming down. This is safe, that's.
Okay, yeah, and so you've got your intake, pressure, you've got your. Yeah, your exhaust, and right there's the middle. So this video is going to show you a bit about the neutral plane. This one, I'm feeling pretty good. This one, I'm a bit nervous. This one, that's a no-go.
G'day everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the neutral plane, which is the layer that exists between the smoke coming out of a structure fire and the air that's being.
Just a moment. Oh, sorry. How freaking cool is that? Yeah.
So
I'm hoping to get you guys over to the burn box so you'll be able to see that. Okay, go ahead.
is there a difference between the neutral plane and the thermal?
Thermal layers?
Yeah,
Yeah, this will go into that and hopefully give you an understanding.
Drawn in. Now, to talk about the neutral plane, it's probably easiest if we start by having a look at how fire works. Now, in this example here, you can see that the smoke and products of combustion are being lifted above the fire by the convection current. And as our smoke and flame are being lifted above the fire actually draws more air in around the base. And this creates a convection current where cold air is being drawn to our fire and smoke and flame are being pushed away. And this is actually what we see inside a structure fire as well. We generally see that the smoke and flame will accumulate at the ceiling, and then we'll see cold air being drawn in from the outside at the bottom of the room. Now, this is actually where we start to see our neutral plane come into play, because we have cold, dense air coming in from the outside, and we have hot, more buoyant, less dense air at the top. And this difference in density is actually really important because this is what gives rise to a neutral plane. Now, to demonstrate this, what we're going to do is a little experiment with some hot and cold water. And these will actually behave in a very similar way to how our cold air and our smoke will behave inside a structure fire. Now, what I've got here is I've got a tank of cold water, and I'm basically just filling up this cup with some hot water and some food coloring added to it, just so that we can see the difference between our hot water and our cold water. As I add the hot water to the cold water, you can see that it immediately starts rising to the surface because the hot water is a lot less dense than the cold water because it's a lot hotter. Now, what you'll see is that as it rises, it actually gets to the top and then starts spreading out across the tank of water. And this is similar to a structure fire because as our smoke rises to the top and then hits the ceiling, it will actually spread out until it finds another opening. And this is the same with what we can see in our tank. The hot water spreads out across the tank, and as it does, we start to see a layer between the hot water and the cold water. And this is a demonstration of the neutral plane. Because as we can see in this live fire demonstration, the hot smoke and the cold air being drawn in don't want to mix. And this is because of the different densities between the cold air that gets drawn in by the fire, which is a lot denser than the hot smoke that's being pushed out by the fire. Now, this is an example where the neutral plane is very defined. However, in the real world, it's not always that simple. And this is because the line between the cold air coming in and the hot air coming out isn't always necessarily so well defined. In fact, what we can often see is there's a lot of mixing in this zone. And rather than having a defined neutral plane, what we can actually see is a gradient over a distance where we'll actually see a little bit of smoke, and the smoke will then slowly build up as we get closer to the ceiling. And this is just because the temperature is slowly becoming hotter as we go up. And as it becomes hotter, it becomes less dense and more buoyant, and that's where the hotter smoke is going to be contained. Where on the other side, as we get lower, what we're seeing is it's getting colder and denser, and that's where we're starting to see more and more air. And therefore, we might end up seeing more of a gradient with our smoke rather than such a defined layer. However, in either case, the same process is still essentially happening where our cold air is being drawn in towards the fire and our hot smoke and products of combustion are being pushed out and away from the fire. All right, so now we've seen that the neutral plane actually exists between a temperature difference between the cold air being drawn into the fire in the air track and the hot smoke and products of combustion that are being pushed out of the fire. And it's the difference in density between these two layers that actually creates our neutral plane. And the neutral plane isn't necessarily always a really defined layer. It may just be a whole mixing area where the cold air is mixing with the smoke and we just get a gradient in smoke as it actually rises higher and higher. But by knowing this, we can gain a better understanding about what's actually happening inside our fire and how our fire suppression techniques are going to influence the outcome of that particular incident. But that's it for this one. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Okay, did that clear it up a bit, or should we talk about it a little bit? Okay, we'll talk about it a little bit more. Okay, so what is thermal layering?
When the gas is in the air layer, the hottest being on top and the cold air being on the bottom. That convection current.
I can't draw a chair, so I'm gonna draw the boxes on fire. We don't have it. Okay, right, so it's burning, okay, so these gases, they're going up, right? And then the hottest ones here. And then we got here. And then this one is. Now, it's not gonna look like that in a fire, it's very rare. You can see different temperatures when you use your tick. It shows you a lot better than your naked eye. Okay, so this is where all of our gases are going. And so which direction are these going? This is, we got a window here. So where are these gases going? Okay, they are going here. And then I've got air coming in here. Okay, so we've got thermal layer here. Cold. There, and then the hot. Is moving that direction. Okay, so the area between the hot and the cold is the neutral plane. So air going out, cool air going in, neutral plane. Did that make it
Yeah.
a little bit? The brain starting to grasp it? Okay. So the neutral plane is that division between hot air going out, cool air coming.
So if you only had that window as the ventilation point, then the cold air depression on the bottom part. and the
Yeah,
Smoke would.
Yeah, so if you put your own opening, then you're gonna have. Cold air coming in there. The hot air going up there. Oh, I erased it. Sorry, I can draw it again. Hot air goes out, hot air goes out because it's higher pressure and it wants to go to lower pressure. And then cool air is coming in, feeding that fire.
I was like, that's not right.
Nope, hot air out, cool air in. Background. What are some indicators of a backdraft?
You go up to a closed window and you can see the smoke like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
pulsing.
from, yes,
There's soot on the windows, but
there can be.
what the video was saying.
Yellowish smoke, they said.
It can be, yeah. And then, how does the backdraft happen? What is it? It's missing blood. Just trying to get some oxygen. So. Inside. Pay close attention to the smoke. What it's doing.
About halfway through the living room, me and my partner heard a boom. And then the
Okay, so ceiling collapse. What happened there? When it collapsed, it created an opening, right? So it fed the oxygen, fed the
ceiling fell.
A backdraft is caused from some type of combustion burning the house and depletes the oxygen inside the structure. But because you've removed the oxygen, they can't burn. So once you introduce oxygen back to it, it explodes out in a violent eruption.
Okay, first of all. This show is so ridiculous. He would be dead because he doesn't have his BA on and those superheated gases.
It's so funny seeing those shows and they're like in the middle of a fire and they're like, guys, we need to. Okay, you're something.
Pretty ridiculous. Yeah. Okay, smoke explosion. It's gonna get kind of muddy here. So a smoke explosion. So you've got all of that turbulent, thick, nasty smoke. Just, it wants to burn. And so it's doing its thing, it's a lot of pressure, it's ready to go, and then something flame source or an ignition source hits it, and then so got a video of that as well. Guess it's a bit further here than I thought. I might have to go back.
G'day everyone and welcome.
No, I need to go back and find this video. So it's be a good place to take a break. It's 10:18, come back at 10:30. Pick back up. Watch the ceiling and what's happening. The one that I was involved in was a lot more dramatic. It was low, it really was. It was just rolling, just a ball of fire. It was pretty awesome.
I had a question on the on the video where all the people were sitting in the room and it showed the neutral zone. What was, when he was spraying his nozzle and then the smoke would come down, what was happening there?
It's called like rebound. You'll see, like as the steam expands, it'll occupy more space, push it down a bit, and then the cooling will lift it back up.
Are you looking for a dental practice? If it's you.
Okay, no. So smoke explosion, we've got smoke, it's doing its thing, and then what happens?
Oh, have oxygen.
Okay, it's got oxygen. I'm showing you smoke like this. What's it missing? Fuel. It's got the smoke is fuel.
It's the ignition point.
Ignition stuff. Okay, so here's a video. They slow it down. Pretty sick. Huh?
Nice.
Straight into your back with Dr. Pills. Don't think I need them completely changed my.
See that again?
Okay, this one's a longer one. I want you to watch, and then I'm gonna pause it, we'll go back. This is about 10 minutes, but I want you to watch everything that's going on here. And see if you can pick up on some of those cues, things that might contribute to the outcome of this. And can you guys see it okay, or do you need me to close the blinds? What's happening with the smoke here?
Getting darker.
There's more smoke, it's getting darker. What do you think is happening to the pressure? Is it increasing? What did you say?
I was rising.
There's that angry smoke that sometimes I refer to it, angry smoke, so. Can this ignite?
Yes.
Should this guy be up there? What is going on here then?
No, God.
Okay. So we see here. Lots of thick, nasty, dense. Under pressure smoke. What are they doing here? So they're. Opening it up, but what do they not have in place? Watch closely. It's that. Budget. Some things that we see. Got this on fire here. Smoke is getting worse. Getting pretty ugly, right? A hole in there. Not quite sure where this fire is. But I question why people without air packs were standing up and going in. What's gonna make this fire better? Water. Water. Seems like it took a big. We're going back to like previous tactics where we would ventilate to let that out when what we can do is get water on it and start absorbing some of the heat. I know I am one of the officers here. I know a couple other ones are in the same thing. If you see fire while I'm getting set up, doing my walk around, you see fire and you can put water on it, put water on the fire. That's gonna make things better for us. It's gonna make things better for the occupants. It used to be, it's some old school thinking that if you put water on it, it's gonna convert steam, it's gonna drop down and steam out and kill the occupants, and that's not what happens, okay? We saw that little bump in the, like when we put the water on the fire, drop down, and then it goes back up, and then it cools, okay? And then we're gonna continue to hit it with water to cool it.
Would you spray it from the outside?
Yeah, until I had a hose line in place. This could have been, they could have hit it from the outside and transitioned into the inside and gotten, I think that this fire they could have caught. They had put water on it.
You said it took a long time.
Yeah, so, and I, not having all of the information, I can only go by what I'm observing. I don't like to judge other people's fires because I don't have the information that they have, but.
I'm curious because it looks like they have a hose line going to that front door and in that front door. So if they have water going inside, because they pulled it out to get it for the exterior stuff. So if they had it inside, then are they not spraying it inside to cool that down?
It's possible that they were not in the right area. Or couldn't find it.
Maybe the fire was like in the attic, like in an attic space, and they didn't know how to get to the attic. So it's just-
Yeah, that could have been that they were having a hard time finding it. And so then we see here at like, what is it, about six something, when we see that. It happens really fast, but you see the second, and then poof. And blows that chief's helmet off. And so I'm wondering if there was a room in there that was oxygen starved and something happened. Because we have openings, so I'm gonna guess that there was a room that didn't have, it was ready to burn, but didn't have oxygen, and then something happened to change that. So see if you guys can see it. It's gonna be here in a few seconds here.
You're seeing black stuff like that, it's just trying to.
What's that?
So when you're seeing like dark smoke like that, is that kind of like a sign that everyone needs to get out? Or-
Not necessarily,
Oh,
but it's not a good sign. So it's a sign that we want to make it better. Good pause there. So you see, that's a lot of fire. So we talk about, and we'll talk about this as we go into like fire suppression, but big fire, big water. That water is not sufficient to overcome the BTUs that put out by this. And water on a fire, what kind of reaction? I think. What is it?
Good.
An exo.
Alright,
Water on the fire?
Oh, that's endo.
Okay.
Sorry.
Steve. So a lot of things we can learn. What happens in a classroom? And what's happened there? Like what has led up to October?
It was burning not enough oxygen. And, can you like fill it all that heat in there? So then the oxygen.
Everything was at a point, at its ignition point. We thought it was missing something. Oxygen. And then simultaneously. Poof. Okay, what's a fully developed stage?
Or everything, or all the fuel or all the oxygen has been used up and it needs more to keep up.
And two types of fully developed fires.
Fuel limited and ventilation.
Okay, what is fuel limited?
No longer has any thing to burn like the table and stuff like that. So the reducing agent is going.
Yeah, so it's got the oxygen, it's got the ventilation, but it doesn't have sufficient fuel to sustain. Okay. On the other side, what's a ventilation limited?
Whereas all the oxygen that needs.
yeah. Has all the, has a lot of oxygen, it's not. Or. No, I have a lot of fuel, it's not a lot of oxygen.
So the ventilation limits how much fire will have. Fuel limited. The fuel,
I'm gonna get it.
well, yeah, okay. Okay, so fuel limited, to increase your heat release rate, you add more fuel. Right, event limited reaches a peak when it has used up all of its oxygen. Okay, windows can fail, it's too enough heat, enough pressure, it will break windows. And what happens when that happens? What happens when that happens? What, when you have window break,
That's source of oxygen.
we call that unplanned.
Can't control. Right?
Yeah, so you have another air intake, another ventilation. Okay, so, yeah, that would be an unplanned ventilation. You guys will go, you'll be doing ventilation in a couple weeks. Okay, so I think we've hammered this, but just to reiterate, Even coordinated ventilation increases the combustion rate in vent limited fires. So what do we want to have in place?
Water.
Well, line in place. Okay, I think we've hit on the decay stage. What's happening in the decay stage? You mean the fire's out? No. The telephone.
Okay.
Okay, so does this make sense? In a fuel limited decay, it's run out of fuel. What will cause it to go back into growth? Adding more fuel. An event limited decay, what's happened?
Wow.
So what needs to happen to for it to transition back into the growth stage? Okay. How you guys doing? Ready to press on? All right. This is high pressure or low pressure here? High pressure. Trying to get out. Lower pressure, cooler air. What's this area here? What do we call these? Thermal layering. What is flow path?
Oxygen, yeah, oxygen flows away from the fire, or the smoke. Pretty much the direction that oxygen and smoke flow away or towards the fire.
Okay, so the smoke and hot gases travel away from the fire, and what's it trying to do? You look like you wanted to say something before Russell started talking, so go ahead. Yeah, I'm pointing at you, Alex.
It's lower pressure, so it's
Okay,
gradient kind of thing.
okay,
Cooler,
so
cooler pressure.
yeah. So we have a fire here. Where's this gonna try and go? Athletic least resistance. So anywhere there's an opening, it's gonna try and go there. So here it goes in here. It goes over here. It's trying to get out. All right. This is one of the reasons we preach sleep with your door closed. I actually got some pretty cool pictures of a fire I responded to and the difference in door closed versus door open. I'll try and find those on a break. What are some things that will determine your flow path?
And the structure, so you know, like a window open, or open.
Okay. And the size of the opening?
Yeah.
And say, would the compartments make a difference, like if it's an open structure versus like a closure structure, where small walls and stuff like that?
Yeah. What's in its way? The things we need to be careful about is working in that flow path. We talked a little bit about it. I think that Richie talked about being at the top of the stairs. Where was that? The smoke and hot gases going? Where's the flow path? It was up that stairwell. I think of it like a chimney's come on there. So you don't want to be in that path if at all possible. You feel it hot. On a windy day, that will also impact. Because the wind pushes into the building. It can overcome, it can push the fire. You know, we talk a lot in the wildland about wind driven fire, we can often have that in a structure. We use mechanical ventilation, what is mechanical ventilation? We haven't gone over it yet, but if you know it.
So we can, like, using a pressure fan or like the hydraulic ventilation?
So we think of like using, you said the pressure fan, so positive pressure, so we're putting pressure in to push that, the smoke and hot gases out. Power of the wind can actually overcome that. Yeah, so here, it speaks to it that once the fire has filled the structure's compartment with the hot unburned gaseous fuel, using ventilation only will not put you ahead of the fire, because we need to do what to it?
Cool
Cool
atmosphere.
it, yeah. Stop that, chemical reaction there. Okay. This is unplanned ventilation, like with that windows failing. I've heard it is actually can be lower than this anywhere, as low as like 8 miles an hour, which for us is a normal day, a gentle breeze. So consider this too. If you have strong winds, like what was it Monday, Tuesday? Ooh,
Yeah.
I think if the smoking hot gases had tried to push out towards that wind. All right. So if we want to put out a fire, what do we need to do?
Take away its oxygen.
Or one other?
Water.
Take away the what?
Oh, okay, oh,
Okay, and what do we typically do? All right, what determines the flow path in a structure?
Number of obstructions, no.
Okay, obstruction, yeah,
ventilation and structure.
okay,
Maybe opening the floor.
okay. With the floor that it's on affected?
Yeah.
Keep going here, if you guys are good. If you need a break, give me the signal. That might be other. Something. So our building construction can certainly contribute to the spread and intensity of the fire. And also make the building susceptible to collapse. Got a video in here talking about that, so we're gonna move ahead a couple slides. What do you think contributes most to the fire growth? Is it the structure or is it the contents? Contents. We have a lot of stuff. And then we have so much stuff that we have to go rent a place to put our stuff. Thinking about new homes that are being built and thinking about like some legacy homes, like older homes. What are some of the distinct differences you guys can think about?
Balloon frame versus, what's it called? Balloon frame versus modern construction.
Okay. So that's certainly a factor. What else?
Your homes are like very open. I feel like
What did you say, newer homes are?
very
Yeah,
open. like
absolutely.
floor plans.
Yep, people like open floors, high ceilings. So if you have a home with a high ceiling, what are you thinking about when you think about thermal layering or the neutral plane? Yeah, so you might have a high volume of fire, but your hot gases are up there. Does that mean you're safe and out of the woods? No, not necessarily. What other things?
Are like the difference between newer and older homes is a different material that they're made out of?
Yeah, definitely. So we're gonna watch this, I believe this one's,
G'day everyone
about
and
10
welcome back.
minutes.
In this video, we're going to be looking at how structural fire behaviour has changed significantly over the last few decades and what those changes mean for firefighters on the fire ground. Because since the 1960s and 70s, we've seen the time to flashover reduce from 30 minutes down to times as low as 4 or 5 minutes. And we've also seen that structural collapse is happening at a much earlier stage than has ever happened before. And we're also seeing extreme fire events such as ventilation-induced flashover, backdraft, and smoke explosions far more often than we had previously. So the question is what has actually changed? And the answer is, well, quite a lot. Because when we have a look at modern homes in comparison to homes from the 1940s and 50s, we can see that there are a lot more synthetic and man-made materials being used to furnish these homes. And we can also see that the building materials themselves have also changed. Where once upon a time we were using a lot of hardwood and more dense products to build our home, whereas today we're using a lot more lightweight construction like pine and LVLs, and the connection methods have also changed because once upon a time the connection point between timbers was protected deep within the timber in the form of large nails, whereas now many connection points are on the external of these timbers in gang nails and similar types of connection methods. And these aren't the only changes, because we're also changing the floor plans of our building, where we're moving to more open plan style living. Now, this means that as a fire is growing, it's going to have access to more oxygen, which means the fire is able to progress at a faster rate than it may have otherwise done so. So we're going to go ahead and dive into each of these factors to see just what effect that they've had on the modern fire ground. And we're going to start with fuel. Because once upon a time, the fuels that we build our homes and businesses with were largely naturally based materials of cotton, wood, and wool. Now, while these materials are undoubtedly flammable, they are nowhere near as flammable as the modern synthetic materials that we are putting inside our buildings, such as polyurethane foams that make up much of the padding inside modern furniture. And when we look at modern synthetic materials, we can see that their heat of combustion, which is how much energy they're releasing on a pound-for-pound basis with other fuels, is much higher than older legacy materials listed here as cellulose, which is one of the main building blocks for wood. And so when we have a look at something like polyurethane, we can see that there's far more energy being stored inside these fuels that are available for the fire to burn. Now, this means that when we burn polyurethane in comparison to wood, we're actually getting more energy being released by that fire. And that's not the only component that makes these fuels more flammable, because quite often these materials are often much lighter and have a much lower thermal inertia. Now, this means that it takes less energy for these fuels to be heated up and begin to pyrolyze than it does for the more dense and higher thermal inertia fuels like timber. So when we're looking at modern synthetic fuels, we can now see that not only do they release more energy on a pound-for-pound basis, but they can also take less energy to increase their temperature to the point of pyrolyzing, which means they can then begin to start to emit more and more flammable smoke. And this means that the whole system works in a big feedback loop, where we see that less energy is needed to go into the system to then release more fuel, which then creates more heat, which then goes back into the system, and the whole thing can begin to snowball, meaning the fire is able to burn much faster than it would have before. And this is clearly visible here in a comparison between some polyurethane foam and a piece of timber, where the piece of timber takes a lot more energy to be ignited than the polyurethane foam, which as soon as it is ignited, it burns easily and quickly. And the effect of this was clearly demonstrated by Underwriter Laboratories when they did the side-by-side comparison of modern versus legacy fuels, where the room with the modern fuel load progressed to and through flashover in less than 5 minutes, whereas the legacy fuels took as long as 30 minutes to reach flashover. And this is just a very clear example of the effect of modern synthetic fuels and how they have dramatically changed the modern fireground. Now, this is where things have really changed, because as you've just seen, fires burning in natural materials can still progress through flashover, but they can take a lot more time to get there. Whereas fires burning in more modern fuels can release a lot more energy a lot faster than the legacy style fuels, and therefore reach flashover in much shorter timeframes. But to be able to release all of this energy, these fires will need access to an air supply that is sufficient to allow all of those flammable pyrolysis products to be fully oxidized. And in the case of a polyurethane foam, which is a
Fire in the irrigation canal.
there are many different chemicals that can be emitted, but the main byproducts from a well-ventilated fire will be H2O, which is water from the hydrogen, and carbon dioxide from the carbon, with carbon monoxide making up a smaller proportion of the smoke. Whereas if the fire starts to use more oxygen than what is available to it, it will begin to become underventilated or ventilation controlled. When this occurs, there will be less carbon being fully oxidized, and as a result, more carbon monoxide and carbon will be released from the fire. Now, what this means on the fire ground is that the fire will begin to produce more smoke, and that smoke will not only begin to further restrict the inward flow of air, but the smoke itself will be becoming more flammable and more toxic. Now, what this demonstrates to us is that while every fire is different and needs to be treated that way, it is also quite possible, if not likely, that the fire will have reached some kind of ventilation control by the time a fire brigade arrives, and that any addition of air without effective suppression to the fire will most likely result in a rise in the fire's heat release rate and an escalation in the fire. Now, there really is a lot more to the subject of fuel control and ventilation control, but in the interest of not going down a massive rabbit hole, I'll save that for a video of its very own. Now, as I've already mentioned, this isn't the only factor that's changed in modern buildings, because the actual floor plan of these buildings has also significantly changed. Whereas back in the early 1930s, 40s, and 50s, it was more likely to have smaller rooms and more compartmentation within a building. Whereas today, it's more likely for us to have a more open plan living space, which contains a lot more oxygen, allowing the fire to burn and create more heat, and therefore access a lot more fuel before its growth is finally restricted by the limitation of the available air. Now, this brings us to the third factor that has really changed how these fires are going to burn. Because once upon a time, there were a lot of hardwoods and large thick timbers being used to construct these buildings. Whereas today, we've moved to a lot more engineered timbers, such as chipboard and other pine resin-based materials. Now, while these materials are excellent for building materials because they are lightweight, easy to manufacture, and easy to use, they are also a real problem for firefighters because their lightweight nature makes them faster to burn and quicker to collapse than older, more legacy-style materials. Now, this means that the time to structural collapse has also reduced significantly in more modern buildings, as we've seen a move to these lightweight engineered timbers. So all of this just goes to show that modern fires can be significantly different to fires that we may have encountered in the decades past, with shorter times to flashover, more flammable and more toxic smoke, and a greater likelihood of structural collapse. And so the more that we can learn about structural collapse and how fire behaviour has changed, the better off we're going to be. But that's it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. If you liked it or have a comment to share, check it down below. Give the video a like or share, or I don't know, do the following.
Okay, what is fuel load? I can never hear you, I'm sorry.
Like, amount of fuel that's in an area.
Okay, so if we're thinking about going to a house that's on fire, what is the fuel load?
The contents inside of the building,
Yep, contents, what else?
the building itself.
Anything that's combustible. All right. Okay, so like we talked about earlier, what's gonna burn faster, or what's gonna burn quicker, I guess, would be a better way to say it. The log, a board, sawdust. Yeah, and because what? Okay, so the same thing applies in the contents of a structure. So if we burn our contents, the contents can then spread to the structural members, may start in the structural members. But what's gonna happen if we're burning those structural members? Yeah, you can have collapse, yeah. Another thing that can happen, and this is something we see particularly in type 3, or maybe some buildings with knee walls. You might have hidden fire. Had one the other night that was in the wall. Had a hard time kind of identifying exactly where it was. We're gonna have to open things up, find it. This look like this might be a problem for us. I don't think we've gone over it, but how many GPM does a fire sprinkler put out? With it? Yeah. So we're gonna have a problem here. So one of the areas we respond to is the Home Depot. We'll be on the first one. That is right up there. What's in the Home Depot?
A lot.
A lot. What's the makeup of the building?
That's true.
What is it?
That's true.
And
Is it-
yeah, I'm gonna see all these things. How about the ceilings? They're high, yeah. I don't know exactly. I think there's some open trusses in here. Okay, how much does the lumber that's on those racks weigh? How much does a gallon of water weigh? What kind?
8.34 pounds.
Okay,
8.36.
how much does 150 gallons weigh?
Close to 1,000.
It's a lot, it's math. We're putting water onto those stacks of shelving full of lumber or whatever. Okay, what's gonna happen? They might collapse. And not only do you not want to be under it, what happens if you're in there with a hose line? Comes down, cuts off your water supply, that's where you want to be. There can be so much fuel in there that your hose lines are not going to make a difference. So we need to know what's in our area. That's the pre-incident surveys or pre-fire planning. Where's an area that we might have troubles because of the large building with high volumes of material.
Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart. How about particularly in, yeah, Walmart is a good example, but in our jurisdiction, was that?
Like you said.
Kisa? Okay, Kisa might be.
Yokes.
Yokes. Now, what's another complication there? If you're going in there with a hose line and you've got some poor visibility,
A lot of open space, a lot of space to get lost in.
yeah. And you've got the configuration of the different aisles and stuff.
I have a shop there a lot.
Yeah. So you might be familiar with the layout there. But you have to think too, of like, how far did your hose line stretch?
You got like the schools.
Schools? A high fuel load, big building. Well, actually. How much time do we have with direct fire impingement on structural members in modern construction?
15 minutes.
On a good day. Okay, 5. Here we talk about the circulating self-ventilating. What does that mean, you guys?
Burns a hole in the roof.
What's that?
Burns a hole in the roof.
Okay. What else? What's that?
Breaks window.
Yeah. What's gonna cause the windows to break?
Could a backdraft also blow off a window?
Yeah, good, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was strong enough to blow off that guy's helmet, so.
Yeah. Maybe if you had a pack on.
Okay, combustible interior finishes and furnishing, we talked about that in the video. Stuff's nasty, that stuff gives us cancer. So protect us. We spent a good amount of time at the beginning of Academy talking about that. Ways you can protect yourself, so what are some of the significant ways we can protect ourselves from what's burning? What's that? Wear your PPE properly, what else?
Decon.
What's that?
Decon.
Decon, good, yeah, situational awareness, okay, what else?
You don't need to be in the area, don't be in the area.
Yeah, good, don't needlessly expose yourself. What else?
Establishing control zones.
Okay, control zones, yeah. Okay, what else?
Shower when you get back.
Yeah, take a shower. It's no longer as a cool to smell like smoke in construction fire. I think I shared with you guys, maybe I didn't, but I have done the Seattle stair climb for many years. It is an event to benefit the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Firefighters have a high rate of leukemia and lymphoma, just from the stuff that we are exposed to. Our family members are as well, because we bring that stuff home. And things that we're pushing to combat cancer is decon your gear. Every time you use it, you're gonna wash it. Every time you're exposed, you're gonna, sorry, I should clarify, every time you're exposed, you're gonna wash it. You're gonna take a shower afterwards, you're gonna get that crap off, right? But while we were at the stair climb and walk by, the guy's gear, and I think he had just climbed, so it was kind of, it was hot, it was off-gassing, and oh my gosh, it reeked of structure fire. I was like, what are you doing? Washing. It's a simple act that can reduce your. Okay, so here, we have a problem here? Yeah, okay. So what? If we have a building adjacent, what are we worried about? We've got to talk about it, like, kid, I hear you.
Well, right now you got those power lines for starters.
And what are those power lines considered?
Overhead tankers.
Okay, and an exposure? I guess that was a pretty vague question. Yes, they're considered electrical conduits. That's an exposure, right? We could have a building here, which could also be an exposure. How does an exposure fire happen?
And the heat kind of makes it kind of off gas, so then it can kind of fire, if it gets an ignition source, can start lighting that on fire.
Okay, so what kind of heat is coming from this building to another one?
Action.
Could be convection, and so how does convection work?
So you got your fire source and it's. The heat from the fire source is going over to. Like being pushed over to the other structure,
Okay, how is it being pushed in convection?
maybe,
Do you want to phone a friend?
yeah.
Okay. You guys want to help them out?
Pressure difference, the pressure gradient, so going from the high to low pressure,
What's-
so it's going to circulate that pressure, because it's going to pull the cold air and push the heat
Okay,
towards that.
so how is the heat being transferred from building 1 to building 2?
Through gases.
Okay, the movement of the hot gases, okay? So it's movement through air or liquid, right? Okay, what other way are we gonna transfer heat from this building to building 2? Radiation, okay, and how is radiation?
Electromagnetic waves.
There you go. How about from this building to the tree, maybe? I can't tell how close it is.
Well, it's close.
Yeah, I could also have conduction. And what is conduction? And this building 1 has to be hotter than building 2, right? So as this building 2, that's an imaginary world here. It has solid members. What's happening to those solid members? We're transferring heat, right? And so what's the heat doing?
It'd be moving, so the heat's moving.
So what has to happen for a building to burn? Or a solid to burn?
Pyrolysis.
Okay. So this is sending its heat over here to building 2. It likes to share. What's happening to building 2?
Heating up and possibly creating pyrolysis in building 2. And then the fire can jump over.
Yeah. And then we saw it too, like remember the candles yesterday?
Oh,
Because that second candle had the vapors able to burn, fire jumped. All right, making sense?
Yeah.
It's all coming together. You also have stuff on the roof that can burn. Wood chase, terrible idea. So to talk about it, go ahead.
So with fires jumping over to other buildings, is that a big problem in the fall when you have leaves falling, leaves catching on fire and then they fall off around to other?
It can, yeah, it can. Certainly any ignition source can become a problem. Okay, so when we talk about exposure protection, what are some ways that we can provide exposure protection?
Master string.
Okay, so we're gonna put water on it. And where are you gonna put the water?
On the other. So building A is on fire, you're gonna be pouring water on the side of building B.
Sure. Yeah, that would be a good tactic. We put a water curtain there, water to keep it. Oh wait, what's another way? Think outside the box.
Maybe some type of ventilation to get the gases from. Let's say a building is shooting flames from the window, right? And all the gases are being pushed on the window. You could vertically ventilate on the roof, and that way those gases start going through the roof instead of the window that is next to the other building. Something like that.
That's like firefighter too, make it right there. Good job. Yeah, so redirect that heat.
Would you wanna turn off like power lines or power, since it's close to the structure?
Yeah, we, dispatch does us a huge favor, and they always dispatch utilities for us, so we can, yeah, so we can have the, power cut off to the building. More so, safety to the firefighters, but yeah, it's, you know, if you have fire or smoke coming up to those power lines, that presents a problem. Because it can conduct electricity through the smoke. Now we're thinking about exposures. Is it only buildings that can be exposures? What else could be an exposure?
Trees.
Trees? Vehicles? Can we move those fuels? Might be harder in some of our more rural areas that have 23 cars that are not mobile. Yeah, I mean, sometimes even when we show up and you see maybe a propane tank next to the house. Move it. How does fuel load affect intensity and rate of fire spread?
There's a lot of fuel, the fire intensity is gonna be greater than if there's not as much.
Makes sense, right? Talk a little bit about different, the difference between older homes and newer homes, but also think about like maybe one of the homes here versus one of the homes up on Candy Mountain. They're gonna be, these ones are a bit smaller. These are single story up on Candy Mountain. Some of those are 3 stories. A lot of square footage in there. I think these ones are like 14 to 18, where you might have one up there that's 3,500, 4,000 feet. We have quite a diversity in our homes. You know, and then down at the bottom of the hill, we have some that are maybe 800 square feet. And look at on page 183, different floor plans. Like Victoria said, it seems like in some of the modern construction, people favor the open buildings, high ceilings.
No.
What's that?
The wall between the kitchen and the.
Just wide open. Where we think about maybe in some of the older homes and even just maybe some different construction, they're more compartmentalized. How do you use a door to your advantage during your operation? Yeah,
Maintain control of it.
with that,
Maintain control of it.
maintaining control, yeah. Yeah, close it. There was a video that, let me go back and see if I have it, because I want you guys to watch it. They keep that door wide open. And what do you think that's doing? It's, yeah, absolutely. I saw one in a class I took where open up the door and then they don their SCBA, you know, put on their PPE.
We watched one last week and it was like donning it really like, and they had the door open and the fire was out of control and they still went in. They were going on the road.
Got all the one from California.
Yeah, it was very like, bad by our heart and the sheriff were like, why are they going inside? And it's, this is not it.
Read these things, who wants to read this out loud to me?
Plastics and excuse me. Plastics and synthetic materials. Use has dramatically increased fuel load in all types of occupancies. They produce large quantities of toxic and combustible gases. And they also and fires in these fuel types can escalate rapidly. Each high temperatures
reach high temperatures and consume structures available oxygen quickly.
We saw that in the video where they compared the legacy to modern. You saw how quickly the modern fuels burn in nasty smoke. These are all some things on a building to consider. Ceiling height, how big is the building, how big are the compartments? The exposures. You know, when you go in a building, you wanna know where the staircase is. Sometimes when we show up on scene, we'll ask the homeowner if they're there, where's the fire? It's upstairs in the bedroom. How do I get there? Where are the stairs? You know, that cuts down your time and your visibility might not be that great. So, ask those things if you can. Another thing that I encourage you to do is every time you go on a medical call, look at the layout of the home. Look at, okay, if I had a fire here, how would I get there? If there was a fire here and I had to get out, how would I get out? Where's the bathroom? Where's the bedroom? You know, you can also look at a building and get some indicators on like where the kitchen is. What's the window gonna look like? How is a bathroom window different than a bedroom window? Do bedroom windows have to be able to open and close? If they're up to code, you have to be able to escape. Whereas like in a living room, it might be a fixed window.
Well, those apartments that we went to go look at, the ones with the big old windows, the ones that were under construction. Were those fixed windows, the big ones? Were they fixed windows?
Are you talking about like
I mean,
the
they're
master
part
bedroom?
Yeah,
They were.
No, the ones like in the bottom, in the first.
the second floor.
The
Oh,
second one, that
second
really
floor.
Yeah.
big, just
Yeah.
full one.
You know what, I'm not sure. But actually, you know, I'd have to go back and look at code requirements. So, and look at the windows again. But they have to also be big enough. So, you know, like if some people have down in their basement, they have like the tiny little windows that don't allow for escape. And so I know that with the updated code, particularly I know in Richland, and when people do remodels, they have to put in an escape window, like big enough for a person to get out of. But does that mean that people aren't doing their own home remodels? What are some other things that we want to consider on our buildings?
HVAC systems, I know that was a big,
Yeah, so what about those?
they're pretty heavy,
Yeah, so they're on your roof,
yeah.
it's a problem.
Yeah.
And we-
So if your roof is compromised and it starts to collapse, you gotta think, obviously, a roof collapse is bad. But a roof collapse with an HVAC system is just that much worse, so.
And it can also increase the likelihood of a collapse.
Right.
So an HVAC on the top would be, that would be considered part of the load. What does this mean?
It's like type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, so your construction type is the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
And how many people they can have in there?
The classification is, if they use it for whatever, like if a building is used for a church or for a school or for, you know.
Okay, so how does that affect your decision making?
Well, I know, depending on the time of day, let's say you go at night to a school, you don't plan on seeing anybody in there, right? Same for a church, maybe for any other type of business. At night, you're not gonna find anybody, but during the day, maybe it's gonna be packed with people. Possible victims in there, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely something to consider, good. But also, if you know. So think about the churches you've been to, think about the schools you've been to. Do you have a picture in your mind of what the inside of it looks like. Okay, so that can give you some cues. How about the homes you've been in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every home's gonna be a little bit different, but. We know that like in a residential structure, you're gonna have your bedrooms, you're gonna have bathrooms, a kitchen, dining room maybe. Common area. In most communities, and ours is not an exception, but a lot of the neighborhoods have similar floor plans. You can, the more you respond, then you're like, oh, I know exactly what that looks like inside because I went to a, medical in a similar home. So I know that the bedroom's gonna be back there or whatever the layout is. When is this a significant consideration to us?
Strip malls.
Strip malls, for sure. What else?
What apartments?
Yeah. Apartments, townhomes. We're starting to get more and more of those multi-family occupancies. They share walls. But definitely what was it?
The uptown.
The uptown, that's gonna be a problem, yeah. Type and location of fire protection systems. But thermal properties, sometimes you have the different makeup can insulate. Sometimes, I've had a couple fires that were made up of like cinder blocks. They held the fire and I couldn't readily see how much, the volume of fire until I got in and looked a little bit closer. Told you about another one, they had really thick walls, and so it held that fire in for a long time. And so just be aware. The other thing is, in that particular home, it was really, really hard to get to the fire. For one, we couldn't go inside because the structural integrity had been compromised. It wasn't safe to put fires in there. It had started as a basement fire. But the other thing is the walls were so thick and we had layers and layers. In there was chicken wire, there was insulation, there was boards, and the fire had gotten up into the wall, they had gotten into the floor and stuff. And it was super hard to find all of the fire and put it out. So, what's a way that we can identify fire within a wall without cutting it up? Yeah. We hit this in building construction. You guys have any questions about that? We saw those gusset plates. Lightweight trusses. Lightweight joists. Also, they're engineered like that. The press board, the OSB held together with glue. Who did the report on the firefighter who had the deck fall on him? It was the Kyle.
Yes, Kyle.
Was it Kyle? So. Okay, we talked about this in building construction. Don't see many of these anymore. And I'm not even aware that any in our jurisdiction. Keep in mind, the construction features, and especially when we do remodels, it hides what the actual makeup of that building is. Does that make sense? I'm not sure I worded it well, but we've got the facades, they put new storefronts on. You guys have been to the Palm Tavern in Benton City. I think we have 3 different roofs on it. And so things get built over the top of things and altered, and then also that can create void spaces. And what happens in void spaces?
Fire.
Okay, buildings under construction, renovation, demolition, these pose, special risks to us. We won't put people inside of here, so, you know, and you shouldn't, if anybody tells you to, you might ask them what their goal is. Also, there's that potential for arson. A renovation can be a hazard because, you might have, you know, exposed members, you can have, you know, maybe they're working on one section and it's occupied in another. You know, just like here, they, you know, might sawdust and, pieces of lumber, things that contribute to that fuel load. Sometimes, yeah, so people doing their own home renovations or people who aren't reputable. And sometimes if they're like doing some rewiring or changing things around, they don't understand, it might cause something that would cause a failure, contribute to fire. Okay. Questions?